Adolf Wölfli, born February 29th, 1864, died November 6th, 1930, was a Swiss visual artist who was one of the first artists to be associated with the Art Brut or outsider art label. Early life. Wölfli was born near Bern. He was abused both physically and sexually as a child and was orphaned at the age of 10. He thereafter grew up in a series of state-run foster homes. He worked as a Verdingbub or indentured child laborer and briefly joined the army. He was charged with the attempted sexual abuse of minors and was sentenced to a prison term. In 1895, following another similar arrest, he was admitted to the Waldau Clinic, a psychiatric hospital in Bern, where he would live out the rest of his life. He was very disturbed and sometimes violent upon admission, leading to him being kept in isolation during his early time at the hospital. He experienced psychosis, which led to intense hallucinations. Creative works. At some point after his admission, Wölfli began to draw. His first surviving works, a series of 50 pencil drawings, are dated from between 1904 and 1906. Walter Morgenthau, a doctor at the Waldau Clinic, took a particular interest in Wölfli's art and his condition. Later publishing Ein Geisteskranker as Künstler, a psychiatric patient as artist, in 1921, which first brought Wölfli to the attention of the art world. Morgenthau's book detailed the works of a patient who seemed to have no previous interest in art, and developed his talents and skills independently after being committed for a debilitating condition. In this respect, Wölfli was an iconoclast and influenced the development and acceptance of outsider art, Art Brut, and its champion Jean Dubuffet. Wölfli produced a huge number of works during his life, often working with the barest of materials and trading smaller works with visitors to the clinic to obtain pencils, paper, or other essentials. Morgenthaler closely observed Wölfli's methods, writing in his influential book, "Every Monday morning Wölfli is given a new pencil and 2 large sheets of unprinted newsprint. The pencil is used up in 2 days. Then he has to make do with the stubs he has saved, or with whatever he can beg off someone else. He often writes with pieces only 5 to 7 millimeters long, and even with the broken off points of lead, which he handles deftly, holding them between his fingernails. He carefully collects packing paper and any other paper he can get from the guards in patients in his area. Otherwise he would run out of paper before the next Sunday night. At Christmas the house gives him a box of colored pencils, which lasts him 2 or 3 weeks at the most. The images Wölfli produced were complex, intricate, and intense. They worked to the very edges of the page with detailed borders. In a manifestation of Wölfli's horror vacuum, every empty space was filled with 2 small holes. Wölfli called the shapes around these holes his birds. His images also incorporated an idiosyncratic musical notation. This notation seemed to start as a purely decorative affair, but later developed into real composition, which Wölfli would play on a paper trumpet. In 1908, he set about creating a semi-autobiographical epic, which eventually stretched to 45 volumes, containing a total of over 25,000 pages and 1,600 illustrations. This work was a mix of elements of his own life, blended with fantastical stories of his adventures, from which he transformed himself from a child to Knight Adolf, to Emperor Adolf, and finally to State Adolf II. Text and illustrations formed the narrative, sometimes combining multiple elements on kaleidoscopic pages of music, words, and color. After Wölfli died at Waldau in 1930, his works were taken to the Museum of the Waldau Clinic in Bern. Later, the Adolf Wolfli Foundation was formed to preserve his art for future generations. Its collection is now on display at the Museum of Fine Arts in Bern. Music and audio recordings. Wölfli's work has inspired many composers. Danish composer Per Nørgaard, after viewing a Wölfli exhibition in 1979, embarked on a schizoid style lasting for several years. Among the works of this time are an opera on the life of Wölfli, called The Divine Circus, the chamber opera Wölfli Scenen Wölfli Scenes, which premiered in Graz, Austria, in 1981, featured music by Georg Friedrich Haus, the Austrian composer of spectral music, Ghost and New Earth, Anton Prestel, and Wolfgang Riem. On their website, the Adolf Wolfli Foundation poses the following question. Naturally enough, the question whether Wolfli's music can be played is asked again and again. The answer is yes, with some difficulty. Parts of the musical manuscripts of 1913 were analyzed in 1976 by Kjell Kaller and Peter Streiff, and were performed. These are dances, as Wolfli indicates, waltzes, mazurkas, and polkas, similar in their melody to folk music. How Wolfli acquired his knowledge of music and its signs and terms is not clear. He heard singing in the village church. Perhaps he himself sang along. There he could see songbooks from the 18th century with 6-line staffs, explaining, perhaps, his continuous use of 6 lines in his musical notations. At festivities he heard dance music, and on military occasions he heard the marches he loved so well. More important than the concrete evaluation of his music notations is Wölfli's concept of viewing and designing his whole oeuvre as a big musical composition. The basic element underlying his compositions and his whole oeuvre is rhythm. Rhythm pervades not only his music, but his poems and prose, and there is also a distinctive rhythmic flow in his handwriting. In 1978, Adolf Wölfli, gelesen and vertoned, the first recording of Wölfli's work ever to be published, was released by the Adolf Wölfli Foundation, Museum of Fine Arts, Bern. Since that time, a number of German musicians have released adaptations of Wölfli's work. A comprehensive list of these artists can be found at the Adolf Wölfli Foundation's music page. In 1987, musician and composer Graham Revell released an LP entitled Necropolis, Amphibians and Reptiles, the music of Adolf Wölfli. This was on his own Musique Brute label in London, UK in 1987. This audio compilation was based on the works of Wölfli, and incorporated digital renditions of Wölfli's compositions, with additional sound effects and ambient soundscapes added to the songs, by Revell. Based on the artwork surrounding Wölfli's musical notations, the LP was a collection of musical interpretations by Revell, as well as DDAA, and Nurse with Wound. This LP came with a booklet, with a biography and images of Wölfli's works. Tracks 8 and 9 are combined into one track. This record was later re-released as the Musique Brute collection, on CD by the Grey Area record label, a sub-label of UK-based Mute Records, under the parent label EMI UK. This audio compilation also includes the other Musique Brute LP release, The Insect Musicians. The CD release also contains a small booklet, containing pictures of Wölfli's artwork, information about his history, and a brief write-up on Revell's process of converting Wölfli's lithographs into songs. In 1992, Terry Riley composed and performed a 2-hour opera entitled The St. Adolf Ring, based on Wölfli's life. In 2010, Baudouin Dillard released a record entitled The Heavenly Ladder, with compositions by Wölfli. See also Outsider Art and Fractal Art. Other outsider artists. Henry Darger, an outsider artist who independently arrived at his own illustrated semi-autobiographical epic, many thousands of pages in length. Mark Baer, a comics artist whose work manifests a similar horror vacui. Joseph Cornell,